Okay. Well, hey, everybody on Zoom. It's lovely to see you. I can't quite see many faces. My eyes aren't all that good, but I know you're there. So just great to see you and everybody in the room. Yeah, just it's a blessing to be here with you. And I think many of you know, that we're doing a study through Matthew's Gospel, and we've had chapter 1 a couple of weeks ago. So today I'm going to be going through chapter 2. And as I was thinking about it, I thought like there was a little overview for the chapter. And for me, it was about God's love for us. He loved us, the world, so much that he gave his only son. But it's also about the enemy's attempts to kill the boy. But fortunately, it's also about God's protection on him and his providence. And he's not going to let anything bad happen, because that's not in his plan. And then there's also some prophecies that are fulfilled within the chapter. As we go through it later on, I'll point out a couple of them. So, and when I begin to study these things, I always realize there's so many incredible things in the Gospels. There's so many incredible things that you could say, so many layers of stuff that you can go down and get involved in. It's like, when you're studying this, like a rabbit's warren, it takes you all over the place. But we've got about 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So I can't get down too far deep. And I'm actually not clever enough to do it anyway. Here's some of these speakers who are just phenomenal. They can break this stuff open. I'm just one of us, I'm just another drunk who's sober today. And so it was Christmas not so long ago. And so it seems a bit of a jolt to go back to chapter 2, which is all very Christmassy. But that's what we got. And so just a very quick recap of chapter 1. Sorry, I have to keep reading my notes because I can't retain things. So I'm looking down here, but I am speaking to you. But I have to write literally a script, because if I try and do it from notes, I look at my note and it will say, talk about chapter, and I think, what am I supposed to say? So I've got this. That's why it takes me so long to do all this stuff. So anyway, Matthew is writing primarily for a Jewish audience, as we've heard, and they would have understand their genealogy that was spoken about in chapter 1, the beginning of chapter 1. It's this big, long genealogy that takes us through all, from Abraham to Joseph, and I think that perhaps that would have made the link to Jesus for these people who were listening to it. They would have recognized that link and seen the Son of God in it. And then we hear about Mary becoming pregnant, and how the angel speaks to Joseph. And he's a great man, Joseph. He's a good man, and he does right by Mary, as we know, and he keeps her safe till the birth. And I know that a lot of people who talk about it as a real love story. It's a real love story between Mary and Joseph, and it's a kind of lovely kind of thing to acknowledge. And in Luke's gospel, he goes into detail about the time of the birth and going to Bethlehem and being in the manger and all of that kind of stuff, no room at the inn and all that sort of stuff. Matthew doesn't go into that, but that's what's going on. And the shepherds were at the stable, come to worship the newborn baby. You remember all of that stuff? Yeah. So, and usually during the Christmas period, which we're not quite now, but you will know that we see the images of the 3 wise men, and they come and turn up at the stable, and they're usually riding on camels, and they're giving their gifts. But that really is just a modern take on the truth of the story. It's just a bit of a take of modern nativity story take, really, because Matthew's chapter 2 actually picks up the story probably about 18 months to 2 years after his birth. That's what most of the commentaries that I've looked at have said. He's probably about 2 when these wise men arrive. He would have been just a little toddler. So Matthew 2 starts with verse 1. It says, now after Jesus being born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi arrived from the east into Jerusalem. So in this we learn that Jesus, as I said, was born in Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is often referred to as the city of David. And that's another link that Matthew is using to help people see that he's pointing to Jesus as the Son of God. And I think, it's got these strong connections with King David from the past. And I think, I'm not entirely sure about it, but I think David may even have been born there, but certainly in that vicinity around there somewhere. And Bethlehem, the word Bethlehem, when you break it down, it means house of bread, because Bethel is, Beth is house, and the Bethel is house, and the hem must be bread. And I thought that was interesting, because Jesus, he actually describes himself as the bread of life, doesn't he? So, there's all these wonderful little connections that you can follow all the way through. Everything's linked to another thing. It's quite amazing. The Bible's an incredible thing. The visit of these magi, it's not recorded in any other gospel. We don't really know a lot about them. We don't know for sure where they came from, except they said it came from somewhere from the east. And I think that's probably what we now call Iran. It was quite a long way that they traveled. And how many, anybody idea how many there were? Do we know how many wise men there were?
Loads.
Yeah. We always think there's three, or I grew up thinking there was three, but the reality is we don't know how many there were. And people speculate that could have been, they actually could have been three, because they gave three gifts, but it could have been 30, because the gifts don't necessarily represent the amount of people, the amount of these wise men that traveled. And we don't know how long their journey took, although it's quite likely that it took a long time. They probably were traveling by camel, who knows? But it wouldn't have been easy for them. We don't know for sure how they knew about the coming Messiah. And we don't know for sure how they, apart from the fact that they were astronomers, how they linked this thing to this star that they began to follow. We don't really know anything about what the star is either, really. And there's loads of different explanations and possibilities as to what it might be and the truth of it. But whatever it was, Matthew it quite clearly refers to it as his star. This is the star of Jesus. And that's what these guys see and follow. And the Magi, they're referred to as wise men and magicians and astrologers. So that's why it's not surprising that God used the star to get their attention. And Magi is actually where we get the word magician from. It's the root of our word magician. And in the world's eyes, they were really smart and wise. But I think these guys were smart and wise for another reason, really, as well. And that reason is that they were spiritually wise, because they were seeking the truth. They wanted to follow this star to seek the truth. And we know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And I think we can learn something about them through their journey, and we can learn some principles that we can follow about our own spiritual journeys, and that we all need to be wise. We should all be wise men, women, and people, and follow the Lord. That's the wise, good thing to do, I believe, and I'm sure most of you do, if not all of you do. And we need to, and so these guys, they were on a journey of faith. And they didn't have a lot, and so are we, really, aren't we? We're all on our journey of faith. So they didn't have a lot really to go on when they get started, but they obviously had a lot of faith. They saw the star, and they knew it was a sign from God announcing the birth of Christ. And as I say, they followed it, and they were willing to sacrifice all their home comforts and the security of all they knew just to get up and do this great big long journey that they didn't even, really know what was going to happen at the end. They just had faith to get up and do it. And Hebrews 11 verse 1 says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. That's a wonderful explanation, breakdown of faith. And it certainly fits with their actions. They hadn't seen Jesus. They had this star and they believed and they set off. And that's not too dissimilar to our own journey of faith. When I thought about it, I didn't know anything about recovery when I get into it. I didn't even know that it existed till I started going to meetings. And at the beginning of that journey, but I had faith to keep coming back, right? And faith to begin to believe and trust in the process of what I saw was going on in front of me. And it's the same, I think, for our Christian journey. I don't know about anybody else. I knew nothing about Jesus. I could barely even say his name when I first started, becoming a Christian, listening, wanting to know more about this kind of stuff. But what I developed was faith to keep wanting to know about it. And the word says faith comes by hearing, doesn't it, really? So that was, that was a long-winded way of saying, we need to have that same faith and wisdom as the wise men. And then we hear about this guy, Herod, King Herod. Actually, there's quite a lot to know about him from various different historians of the day. And he was known to be a really cruel, power-crazy, paranoid tyrant. That's how he's described. He was a nutter. He was not a nice bloke. This guy was nasty. And he was made, he wasn't even really a Jew, apparently. He was made king of Judea by the Romans, but the people who lived in Judea never really accepted him because he wasn't really a properly Jew. So he would never have been seen as king of the Jews and barely accepted as king of Judea. And he was known as Herod the Great, and he was apparently, because he was this great builder and he built a load of add additions to the second temple in Jerusalem. This is the temple that Jesus would have been familiar with, and the temple that is referred to, and the one that was smashed down by the Romans later on. And he had his own wife and two of his sons killed, and some of his other family, and people around. So he's not a nice bloke. Anyway, these wise men, they arrive in Jerusalem and they ask, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him." So that's what they announced when they first arrived in Jerusalem. And I found this little thing when I was looking. It says they come saying, "Where is he? Where is this King of the Jews? Where is he?" And in this commentary, it said, in the commentary, the first question recorded in the New Testament is, "Where is he? Where is he, King of the Jews?" But this guy compared it to the first question that Adam and Eve asked in the Garden of Eden, when they said, "Where are you? Where are you, Adam?" So that's another one of these lovely little, I see these little things, these little comparisons, these little parallels that these clever people can sort of like pull out of all of this. And when I see it, I just think that's really lovely. I wish I could think of stuff. I wish I could see stuff like that, but I don't. I have to be told. But that's all right. That's all right. So they declare they've come to worship him, and I'm guessing that the arrival of these blokes, they would have caused a bit of stir in Jerusalem, but it wouldn't be long before word got back to Herod. And the verse goes on to tell us he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And as I've said, he was a paranoid tyrant, so it's no surprise he was disturbed. Hearing about a king, they were calling the King of the Jews, and this baby being born would have really done his head in, I would imagine. And but it does say all of Jerusalem were troubled as well. And I reckon that's because they were really fearful of this guy, what he was capable, what he might have done. And then at first, when he's talking to these magi, he plays it really cautious and quite deceitful, and he wants to find out more about the birth of the king. The verse says, when he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. So all these chief priests and these teachers, they would have known the scriptures inside out, backwards and forwards. And in there, they would have seen that one of the prophets talks about him being born in Jerusalem. So So that, and the Jews at the time, these people at the time, they were all waiting for a Messiah. They knew that a Messiah was coming. They were all the way through the Old Testament. There's talk of this coming Messiah. So the Jews were literally waiting for this somebody to come. But they thought it was going to be somebody more like King David, and who was like a real warrior king. And they thought it was going to be somebody who would come and deliver them from the situation that they were in, deliver them out of this captivity by the Romans, to set them free as a nation again. But and I think that's partly why they rejected Jesus, and Jesus had a message of a very different kingdom. His message was the kingdom of God, not the kingdom on earth, that he was going to come and smash the Romans. That wasn't, as we know, that's not where he was coming from. And then, as I said, it said, but Bethlehem, the land of Judah, by no means are amongst the rulers, the least of rulers of Judah. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people. So that's one of the prophets, Micah, in the Old Testament, Micah 5. That's one of his prophecies that Matthew brings into the chapter to describe where Jesus is coming from and who he is. And the chief police and all, the chief priest and all of those, they would have known that and understood that. And verse 7, then Herod called the Magi and secretly found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him. So he sends off these Magi, and I think here, right, we're seeing Herod just being really cunning. All right, he's trying to lull them into a false sense of security by being all matey with them, in what it sounds like he's doing. And then he tells them this blatant lie. He just comes on right and says that he wants to know where they are so he can go and worship with them. Now, I think the reality is he just wanted to kill him. He had no intention of worshiping this baby Jesus. It was actually more likely that he would have him killed, because I don't think he would have, who knows, but you get the impression he's not the kind of bloke that does his own murdering. He'd have got people to do it for him. And you know, I was thinking about all that kind of stuff, and I said, I'm sure during the course of our lives, we've all been around people like that, people who just lie, barefaced lie to your face, and people who would have said any old nonsense to get us to do what they want. And many of us, and me, probably done it ourselves. I know I have. When I was at it, I would have, there was times when I just didn't even know how to tell the truth. The truth wasn't important. It was just getting what you want that was important. You'd say anything.
Oh, that's
Yeah. Yeah. So finally, anyway, praise the Lord, right, for forgiveness, for moving us on and getting us into sobriety. Yeah. Finally, after a long time seeking him, the Magi finally arrive where Jesus is, and it says this is verse 11. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down to him and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. We all know these stories. Well, I know them from my childhood, really, but I've known them a long time. And so again, you can see that some time has passed there, because by the time the Magi get there, it says on coming to the house. So they've moved out of the stable, they've gone up in the world, they've got their own gaff now, they're doing all right. Jesus and Mary, they're looking after the baby, all's going well. Yeah, and so this is the house where they give them their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And while I was doing this study, I saw, went off on one of those rabbit trails, and it was saying about gold is given as a gift because Jesus was a king, and frankincense was given because Jesus was a priest, and myrrh was given because he was a sacrifice. And I mean, apparently myrrh is part of an embalming fluid. I know very little about myrrh, but that's what it's used for. So those are the spiritualized version of what it is. Whether or not these magi had any notion of any of that, I've no idea. I think they just simply wanted to honor and worship the king. But there you go. So, and then verse 12 said, and having been warned by God in a dream not to return, not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country. So they've gone off, and up until this point, they've done everything by faith. And this is an instruction from God, which they follow. Fortunately, they've gone the other way. And I mean, I know there's been times when I've not listened. I believe I've not listened. I don't even know if I've heard right from God or all these kind of things. And I've gone off and done things my own way and ended up in all kinds of troubles. But these guys didn't. They listened. And yeah, they could have made a load of excuses, gone another way, but they didn't. They just went through them. Okay, so Matthew turns his attention now to God's protection of Jesus. And when they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, said, "Get up," he said, "take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until you hear, for Herod is going to search for the child and kill him." So again, there's this angel of the Lord speaks to Joseph, as he did in chapter 1, when he talked to him about Mary. And he gives Joseph real definite instructions to pack up and escape. And, you know, I've got loads of stuff. I haven't got time to say most of this stuff anymore. So, and here we see Joseph take Mary on a long journey. We don't know whereabouts in Egypt it was, but it was, you know, again, according to various different things that I've read, they reckon it was about a couple of 100 miles away. So it was a fair old trek for, you know, to walk or ride a camel or donkey with a little kid, a little toddler. That's, again, not an easy, and I think they have to have gone across the Sinai desert. So there you go. And it's, you know, just as well that Joseph did obey, because if he hadn't, Jesus could have been killed, right? You know, we wouldn't have had any of this. We wouldn't have salvation. I don't obviously believe that could have happened because it's in God's providence. He wouldn't have let it happen. So, but, you know, and that's but God, isn't it, really? So anyway, likewise with us, just because we become believers or are in recovery doesn't mean we go have an easy life without problems. Joseph and Mary didn't have an easy life. We won't have an easy life. But, you know, in fact, it's quite the opposite at times. But we can have assurance of God's love for us and the grace of his salvation. Okay, so now he's in Egypt. And verse 15 said, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. So here's another prophecy, a prophetic word that Matthew is using to help people see that Jesus is the Son of God. And that particular out of Egypt is from Hosea 1. And Matthew makes another one of these parallels with the Exodus from Egypt by the Israelites. And he makes it clear that just as Israel as a nation came out of Egypt, so would Jesus, the Son of God, would come out of Egypt. And then goes on, when Herod realized that he'd been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and in its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. So we know that Herod was a nasty piece of work. We've heard that he murdered his own family, but this seems pretty bad even by his own standards. Really, they reckon there were about 500 to 700 people living in Bethlehem at the time. So, you know, maybe on average, they work out that there may have been about 15 or so boys of this age that would have been slaughtered, you know, just ripped out of their mother's arms and literally slaughtered because they were that age. I mean, you know, can you imagine? I mean, it's a level of wickedness, isn't it, really? And then Matthew fulfills another prophecy when he talks about a voice is heard in Ramah, weeping a great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. And that is from Jeremiah 3. And it obviously reflects these mothers who are inconsolable because of what's happened to their kids, their little boys. And then very quickly through these last few verses, after Herod died, says, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, and he said, get up and take the child to his mother and go to the land of Israel. For those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So he got up and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that this Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. So here we hear Joseph has two more dreams. In the first dream, the angel tells him that it's safe to return to Israel because Herod and all those guys were dead. So off he gets the family and he goes off and heads back for Israel. And then through another dream, he hears God tells him to not go back to Bethlehem, but to go to their hometown of Nazareth. That's Joseph's original hometown was Nazareth. When they went to Bethlehem, they were on their way to Nazareth. They just got stuck in Bethlehem to have the baby. That's the background of all that. And then Matthew tells us that in his life fulfilled another prophecy about the Messiah being known as a Nazarene. And that's the last verse of chapter 2. This fulfilled another prophecy that he would be called a Nazarene. And I think it's quite funny how one of the disciples, Nathaniel, says in John 1, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Well, I guess the answer is yes. Amen. Amen. That's it. I better stop there.
Thanks, Rob. Nice one, Rob.